medieval time, trade routes went mainly overland. It took a long time and was often treacherous. Remember, back then most travel was done by carriage, by horseback, or on foot. Roads were often uneven and unkempt. The birth of the Renaissance led to the end of the feudal system, in which the king awarded land grants to most of his nobles, barons, and bishops in return for their contribution of soldiers for the king's armies. At the lower echelon of society were the peasants. In exchange for living and working on his land, the lord offered his peasants protection. It all started in Italy. The late Middle Ages brought about many changes to Europe. Feudalism came to an end, farmers began producing more agricultural goods than they needed, trade increased. These changes led to a new age in European history called the Renaissance. In French, the re is the doing again, and the naissance is the birth. And thus it's called the rebirth, a time of renewed interest in art and learning. Remember, before this time was known as the Dark Ages, and the Renaissance was a time of enlightenment. Trade grows and cities compete. Italian traders brought silks and spices back from Asia. They sold these in Italian cities such as Genoa, Venice, and Florence. These cities were major trade centers. In the markets, people exchanged coins of different lands. Merchants adopted a system to deposit money and write checks. These practices became the basis of modern banking. Unlike the kingdom of other parts of Europe, Italy was divided into city-states. These city-states were often ruled by one powerful family. In addition to ruling families, city-states were dominated by a wealthy merchant class. City-states fought very often. They invented taxes on property and income and other ways to finance their wars. Old and new ideas inspire. Trade brought Europeans into contact with the learning of Asia and the Muslim world. For example, Muslim mathematician al-Khwarizmi had used Hindu-Arabic numerals and developed algebra in the 700s. Muslim scholars had copied and preserved works from ancient Greece and Rome. Many of these had been lost in Europe. Europeans also learned Chinese techniques such as block printing and paper making. During the Renaissance, European scholars took an interest in ancient Greek and Roman ideas. This was the beginning of humanism. Humanism is the study of secular and non-religious subjects such as history and philosophy. Humanists emphasized individual accomplishment and serving the people of this world instead of focusing on religion. Art copies nature. Medieval artists had focused on teaching spiritual lessons. As a result, their art was often symbolic and not realistic. In contrast, the Greeks and the Romans had honored nature and tried to make art lifelike. Renaissance artists imitated the realism of classical art. Art changed in two major ways during the Renaissance. First, artists studied the human body so that they could create lifelike statues and paintings. Second, Renaissance painters used perspective, a technique that allows artists to portray a three-dimensional space on a flat surface. Artists Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci both created Renaissance masterpieces. Michelangelo carved sculptures such as the statue of David. He also painted scenes from the Bible on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome. Leonardo painted the famous portrait Mona Lisa. He also drew thousands of diagrams of ideas for inventions. Architect Brunelleschi used classical features such as domes, columns, and arches in his buildings. Notice the Last Supper painted by Leonardo da Vinci on the left, and if you look on the right side, it shows you how he used perspective to draw attention to the central figure. You study perspective in art, don't you? So did Leonardo.